Okay, we're gonna have to fix this a little bit. Okay. So many of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry if we squish your stuff together.
I'll make sure.
She touched her mic. Need more tape? That's why I put mine on top.
Okay. Here, I'll take this out. Okay, good morning, everyone. I appreciate you joining us today. Yesterday, the U.S. Department of Education laid off 1,300 employees, nearly half of its workforce. This is not just an administrative shakeup. This is part of a deliberate effort. Excuse me just a second. This is never happened before. It's awesome here.
Murphy's Law at work today.
Exactly. So earring this. This is not just an administrative shakeup. This is part of a deliberate effort to dismantle public education in this country. And it is going to hurt students, families, and schools, especially in rural areas that rely on federal support. And let us be clear, there is absolutely no way that the Department of Education can perform its legal obligations with half the workforce. Federal law requires this agency to oversee student loans, enforce civil rights protections, support students with disabilities, and administer billions of dollars in funding to schools. You cannot fire half of the people responsible for these programs and pretend that nothing will change. That is not streamlining, that's sabotage, and that is why I once again sued the Trump administration. This action is another violation of the separation of powers in the United States Constitution and the Administrative Procedures Act, and we are seeking a preliminary and permanent injunction against it for those reasons. If the president wants to reform the Department of Education, he can do so through Congress and as the Constitution requires. And let's be clear, this isn't just about job losses in Washington, D.C. This is about what happens to real people in real communities when you gut the agency responsible for keeping our education system running. The Department of Education is responsible for Pell Grants, work study, and student loans, among other things. With fewer employees handling financial aid, students who rely on federal assistance to attend college will face delays, confusion, and uncertainty about their futures. The individuals, there are a number of programs who are going to be affected by this. And I want to talk about those programs. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. The IDEA requires that the federal government fund 40% of the extra cost of special education. It has never even come close to meeting that promise. And now Instead of fixing that failure and really supporting students with special needs, the Trump administration is making it worse with fewer staff, fewer resources, and more students left behind. Title I funding helps schools with high numbers of low-income students, many of them in rural areas. Cutting staff means less oversight and less money reaching the schools that need it most. Approximately 135 of Arizona's 223 public school districts are in rural Arizona. They serve about 35% of all students in the state, and over 23% of Arizona's rural students live in poverty. Rural communities depend heavily on their local public schools to provide many services beyond education. Unlike urban and suburban districts, rural districts are not able to rely on tax credits, bond overrides for funding, and that makes them even more reliant on federal grants and Title I funding. And I really want to emphasize that. We're talking about a dramatic impact as a result of this executive order on our rural school districts, who really are at a disadvantage when it comes to being able to rely on bond overrides to fund schools. So they more disproportionately rely on this federal funding. Teacher training grants provide professional development to help schools recruit and retain educators. We have already seen some of these grants go away, which has led to teacher layoffs here in Arizona. Just last week at the town hall that I co-hosted with my fellow attorneys general, we heard directly from an Osborne district teacher who will be laid off at the end of the school year because of the DOGE cuts, and these firings will only make that situation worse. What other functions of the Department of Education are at risk as a result of this action being taken by the Trump administration? Let me name a few really big ones. Vocational rehabilitation programs, which help people with disabilities train for and find jobs. Adult education and literacy grants. Fund GED programs, workplace training, and English language instruction. Career and technical education programs help students get job certifications for in-demand trades and industries. These are critical programs for working adults and students looking for good-paying jobs. Defunding them means fewer opportunities for economic mobility. CTE programs in Arizona help students gain skills in the construction trades, engineering, plumbing, and nursing, among others. They are a pipeline to good-paying jobs for students across our state. The Office for Civil Rights within DOE investigates discrimination in schools. With fewer employees to enforce the law, students facing discrimination and harassment will have fewer protections. The Department of Education runs the nation's report card, which tracks student achievement. Without that data, we have no way of measuring how our schools and our students are doing. The Department of Education isn't just some office building in Washington, D.C. It helps keep Arizona's public schools running. It ensures students with disabilities get an education and helps families afford to send their kids to college. Defunding it and indiscriminately firing half of its employees doesn't fix problems, it creates a whole lot of new ones. It hurts students, weakens our rural schools, and takes away opportunities from the people who need them the most. And let's not pretend that this is about making government more efficient. It's not. It is destruction. It isn't about better education policy. It is about tearing down public education by those who want to privatize it for profit. That is what this is fundamentally about. And as Arizona's Attorney General and a proud graduate of Arizona's public schools, including Prescott High School, I am not going to stand by and let that happen. So I would be happy now to take any questions that you have about the lawsuit that we filed, but I wanted to make those initial points. Yeah.
AG Mayes, Superintendent Horn supports the move, says that he'd like to control federal dollars to Arizona schools. How realistic is it that his office could take on these services?
It's absolutely, utterly absurd. I saw those comments that he made on KTAR yesterday, and I couldn't believe it. Literally, my jaw dropped, and I almost fell on the floor. The Arizona Department of Education is already massively underfunded. It is already incapable of even competently administering the voucher program. And the idea that Tom Horn and the Department of Education is going to be capable of administering all of the programs that I just laid out is ludicrous and ridiculous. So I don't know why he said that. Tom Horn knows better. He's been the superintendent long enough to know better, but that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen here, and we're already seeing some evidence of this, is that the U.S. Department of Education has been gutted and has lost basically half of its workforce, and the programs that they administer are not going to be administrable. And so we're going to see, students have problem accessing student loan programs, and we're right up on the time when kids and parents who are going to college are about to apply for student loans, and now we have a U.S. Department of Education that has been cut in half. I mean, and by the way, this is not exactly a bloated agency. We're talking about an agency that has a little more than 4,000 employees. I mean, my office has 1,000 employees. This is a federal agency that handles all of these programs for the entire country and for all of these school districts in Arizona. So, no. And what I suspect is really going on here is what they want to do is basically block grant, although they haven't technically said this yet. Who knows what their plan is? But I think they probably want to try to privatize all this, block grant it back to all the states, and try to have it become voucher program, become a part of the voucher program. But again, what happens to our rural school district? What happens to our parents who have children with special needs? Just think about that. A lot of this funding, so much of this funding goes to, number one, Title I schools who are serving kids who are low income. And number two, it goes to help pay for teachers and aides for students with special needs, kids living with autism. If I were a parent with a child with autism in Arizona right now in public schools, I'd be really worried about this, because the funding for their teachers, for the special needs teachers in our school districts, comes from the Department of Education. And so, so many reasons that it's worrisome. So anyway, yes.
This is the 7th lawsuit that you and your office have filed against the Trump administration. Is this taking away from the job that you and your office have been tasked with?
Yeah. It is absolutely not. What I would say is that, as you know, we are very busy in other areas. Just yesterday, we filed a lawsuit against a number of entities in the real estate industry for alleging consumer fraud. My office has seized more fentanyl in my first 2 years of office than my predecessor seized in his last 2 years of office. And I could go down the line. As you guys know, you've been in this room enough times to know that we are really active. And I have a fantastic Solicitor General's office who are handling these lawsuits. The other thing I would say is we're working in tandem with other states and other state AGs, and so the work gets divvied up and we're able to handle it that way. But, you know, is this my preference to have to be suing the Trump administration now 7 times? No. I wish the President of the United States would follow the Constitution and the law, but I took an oath. I raised my right hand and I put my left hand on a Bible, and I said, it's my job to uphold, I promised to the people of this state to uphold the United States and the Arizona Constitution and to protect them. And that's what all of these lawsuits have been about. They're about protecting the people of Arizona. And in this case, it's about protecting the students and parents of the state who are really going to be devastated if this action is allowed to stand. Well, hopefully we will stop it. We're seeking a preliminary injunction against it, but it's really, really important. So, yeah.
How many states are joining you in this lawsuit?
I believe the count was
20 plus us.
20 plus us, so that would be 21 total states are on this particular lawsuit. Other questions, and then I have some
I have a
stats.
question not pertaining to this, but I was hoping you could answer. Senator Evans Burge requested an audit from the state legislature into the opioid settlement fund, specifically the more than $100 million allocated to the Department of Corrections over concerns about those funds being misused. Would you support an audit into the opioid settlement funds, and do you have any concerns that those funds at the DOC are being misused and not used for the funds that they're intended for?
So to answer the second question first, yes, I'm absolutely still extremely concerned that the opioid funding that was swept from my office last year is being misspent. I believe that it is. It's why I personally asked the Department of Corrections for more information about how they're spending the money. The way they had given it to us for the data, the dashboard that we operate was insufficient and inadequate the first time they gave it to us. So we asked the governor's office to provide proper documentation. So I support Senator Burch's call for an audit. I hope it's an audit by an entity that is truly independent and something we are interested in. Like, we're coming up on what could be, frankly, a constitutional crisis about this, because I have no intention of allowing this money to once again be misspent. It is clear from both the governor's budget and the legislature's budget that they intend to try to sweep another $40 million this year. And I think it's gross. I think it's offensive to the people of Arizona who desperately need detox centers in their communities, who desperately need more Narcan in their communities, who desperately need education and rehabilitation programs. This is about saving lives and stuffing hundreds of millions of dollars into a budget backfill for the Department of Corrections is not saving lives.
Has Hobbs been able to provide those documents you requested, more detailed timelines?
I've got to go back and look at that. I'll get you, can we follow up with that? They did provide additional detail. It didn't change my mind about the fact that I think they spent the money inappropriately. And so I've got some serious decisions to make. I mean, I watch this space. We are actively discussing this, and how, what our next steps are gonna be.
Lawsuit, maybe?
It's not off the table. I feel that strongly about this.
Well, then what happens when the senator's gone? What will you do? I mean, is anybody else stepping up to the plate?
With Barbara, when the,
Well,
with the.
it's Senator Birch. She's
Oh,
resigning soon, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, I would say, I don't think she's the only person in the Senate that's concerned, or in the legislature that shares my concern about this. This is something that I have spoken with the Democratic leadership about already. I had a meeting with them probably a month or so ago. I'm gonna continue to talk to them. I'm gonna continue to ask them to hold firm and to not support any budget that includes a sweep of these opioid funds again. And I'll talk to any Republican. I think there's Republicans out there who would like to see this money spent appropriately in their districts. I mean, keep in mind, we are losing lives in the individual districts of all these legislators who, many of whom, for some reason, it seems okay to allow the Department of Corrections to sweep this money. Not okay for me, yes.
Do you by chance, in filing your lawsuit, know how much the Department of Education gets from the federal government?
Yeah, I was just thanks for that question. So federal funds make up about 19% of public school funding in Arizona. And that means that 1 in every $5 that we spend on education is supplied by the U.S. Department of Education. Arizona received $2.5 thousand in federal funding for every K through 12 student. And then I think the other thing to note is that Arizona schools receive a higher share of funding from federal sources, including the Department of Education, compared to other states. So we received the 7th most in total federal funding when compared to all other states. We were the 7th highest recipient, in other words, of U.S. Department of Education funding. All U.S. funding, sorry, thank you, Lady. Of all U.S. funding among all states. So we actually get more back from the Department of Education than we send to the federal government proportionally and relative to other states. And then last statistic, in all, Arizona received $2.8 billion in federal funding for the 21-22 school year. And in the 2021-2020 school year, Arizona had over 1,150 schools that received Title I funding. So this is particularly important for Arizona, yes.
Is that number, the 19% statistic, is that inclusive of all of the schools, including universities, or is that just K-12 institutions?
We'll follow up on that, yeah, I apologize. But, I mean, again, universities are also gonna be impacted by this, especially as it has to do with student loan funding, yeah.
Some people might see these lawsuits as a way to disagree with the president or the president's administration. What would you say to people who believe that these lawsuits are just Democratic AG's offices who are going against a Republican administration?
Well, what I would say is, it has absolutely nothing to do with politics. If Donald Trump were doing all of these things in the appropriate way, the AGs would have nothing to sue about. This is about upholding the rule of law. Donald Trump has every right to try to achieve his policy goals by going through Congress. What he doesn't have a right to do is violate the separation of powers, right? We have 3 branches of government in this country at the federal level. Congress, the legislative branch, the executive, and the judiciary. Sort of civics 101, right? And the president does not have the authority, as we state in all of our lawsuits, to basically override Congress. And that's what he is doing by slashing and almost eliminating the Department of Education. The only branch of government that has the right to do that is Congress. And so it's my job and the job of every AG, frankly, both Democratic and Republican. I don't know why the Republicans aren't standing up for the congressional branch, to uphold the Constitution and uphold the rule of law. And once we lose the rule of law, we will have lost our country. And so, I think that is why we're seeing so many outraged Arizonans, so many people speaking out about this. I cannot tell you. Well, I could probably calculate it for you. But we have had hundreds, if not now thousands of people calling this office saying, why is Elon Musk and Doge getting access to my Social Security numbers inside the Social Security Administration? Why are they getting access to my personal data inside the Treasury Department, which, by the way, we won a TRO against? So we were able to block Elon Musk inside the Treasury Department. We have another lawsuit, the Appointments Clause lawsuit, that would seek to block him and kick him out of all the other federal agencies where who knows what he's doing? Who knows whether he's hoovering up the private data of Arizonans and Americans inside all of these agencies. So Arizonans are really, really concerned. I did a town hall last night, a teletown hall with Congresswoman Ansari that 13,000 people got on. 13,000 people got on a town hall concerned about what's going on in their country and in their state and whether or not they might be about to lose Medicaid, Social Security, or Medicare. Because they're on the verge in Congress of passing a budget that could slash any or all of those things. And so, that is the kind of thing that I think Arizonans are so very concerned about.
Does that include people across all party lines?
Yeah, trust me, we're getting, the calls would very much appear that we're getting at least, and the people who turned out for that town hall, we had more than 400 people turn out for the town hall that the other AGs came to, appeared to me to be pretty equally divided, Republicans, independents, and Democrats. This thing is affecting people of all political stripes. Let me put it to you in terms of this lawsuit. These cuts by the Department of Education or at the Department of Education, as I mentioned, are going to disproportionately impact rural Arizona. Who lives in rural Arizona? Republicans live in rural Arizona. I know, I'm from rural Arizona. I was born and raised in Yavapai County. And I spent most of my adult life as a Republican. And so the people who are going to be most dramatically impacted by this are rural school districts where the children of many Republicans go to school. And so I am fighting for Republicans just as hard as I am fighting for Democrats, because it's every single Arizonan who is going to be impacted by these education cuts. Every single Arizonan, regardless of your political stripe. So it's not about politics. What is about politics, it would seem, is what Donald Trump is doing. It seems very ideologically driven to me, because this is, for instance, the slashing of the Department of Education has been on the agenda of the Heritage Foundation and the Republicans for decades. But for decades, Republicans decided that they needed to follow the Constitution. It's just Donald Trump who has decided that he can just, leapfrog right over the Constitution and leapfrog right over Congress. And so the Attorney General are going to continue to stand up for the law.
I can only surmise at this point that you probably are getting all your ducks in a row for any lawsuits against social security cuts and Medicare cuts, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we're keeping a very close eye on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We are seeing things happening inside the Social Security Administration that are very concerning related to DOJ. I just read reports yesterday, you probably have as well, indicating that DOJ has shut down or is trying to shut down the phone system inside Social Security, which would make it very, very difficult for our older Arizonans who don't have access to a computer to find out information about their Social Security payments. On last night's town hall, we had a number of seniors call in and very worried about their Social Security payments. And then if you look at the budget that the House passed in the last few days, it's unclear to me how they could actually pass that budget without slashing Medicaid or a couple of these other major programs.
And if they succeed in this budget, how soon do these cuts go into effect?
I don't know. That's a great question. I'm not sure.
But it might not pass.
Yeah, it may not pass. We'll see. I mean, remember, the Senate plays a role here. So, we gotta keep our eyes on that, over the next couple of days. The Senate, obviously, they've got, they need to get to 60 votes to pass, and pass some sort of resolution that would keep government open. But the House passed is obviously unacceptable and would allow Elon Musk to continue to engage in this kind of sledgehammer approach to cutting our government and destroying our Constitution.
Any updates into the investigation into the ESA program, and the couple of cases that have been, of people who have been indicted as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, no real updates. So we obviously have the two convictions, and one was resolved in a different way in court, but we can follow up with you.
Yeah, the settlement, okay.
And, yeah.
One last question.
What would you say for people who are wondering what exactly these lawsuits are accomplishing?
So what they're accomplishing is we are stopping some of the worst repercussions of the executive orders. We were able to stop the federal funding freeze, which would have had huge impacts on our state because we wanted TRO. That federal funding freeze, as you guys know, would have cut Meals on Wheels, Head Start. It would have demolished my efforts to go after the Mexican drug cartels by defunding HIDA. It actually defunded the police. It would have cut Phoenix Police Department by $39 million. It would have potentially eliminated funding for things like the raising of Roosevelt Dam, which is vital for our survival as a state. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Our being able to get a TRO against that, I think, saved what would have been cataclysmic cuts to the state of Arizona. The NIH lawsuit, we were able to stop, at least for now, the cuts to our universities that were doing critical research on things like cancer. It would have, that NIH action by President Trump would have meant that Banner Health would have had to stop doing its Alzheimer's research. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about human lives that will be forever impacted by these actions by Donald Trump. And that is why I'm fighting so hard. That is why we are going to continue to file these lawsuits to protect the state of Arizona. And I could go on and on and on and on. We were able to stop the birthright citizenship executive order, which was blatantly unconstitutional. And Donald Trump apparently thought he had the right to override Article 14, Section 1 of the United States Constitution with an executive order, which states that all persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States. And we got a TRO in that case from a Reagan-appointed judge who took 25 minutes to declare it blatantly unconstitutional. We also got a TRO, as I mentioned, against Elon Musk and Doge for infiltrating and getting inside of the Department of Treasury and getting access to people's personally identifying information. And I would add, the reason that I have said and used strong words about this being a coup against our country is because on at least once, but maybe twice, the Trump administration has actually violated several of these court orders from a federal judge. And that is a Rubicon that we have rarely, if ever, seen crossed by a United States president. And when a president starts ignoring the orders of federal judges, that is when we are in uncharted constitutional territory. And at the end of the day, these cases that we're filing are going to wind up at the United States Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, the United States Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether it still believes in America, whether it still believes in separation of powers, whether it still believes in the Appointments Clause, whether it still believes that we have a constitution in this country that governs the way we the way we operate. So ultimately, it's going to come down to the United States Supreme Court, and we'll see. I still believe in them.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate it.